I'm your host, Brent Rutemeller, and today we have with us International Hall of Fame swim coach Don Gambril. Coach Gambril started coaching swimming back in 1958. He's been an assistant coach for the U.S. Olympic teams 4 times in 1968, 1972, 1976, and 1980. Then as the head coach of the highly successful 1984 U.S. Olympic team that competed in Los Angeles. In all, he has coached 18 U.S. national teams. Thanks for joining us today, Coach.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Brent.
Coach, now we have to start with the 17 years you spent as the head coach of the national powerhouse University of Alabama men's team and the 10 years you spent leading the University of Alabama women. How has the NCAA experience changed from those early days to what you're seeing today?
Well, it's been a big change, especially when I first started coaching, where at that particular time men's swimming had 24 full scholarships, and of course there wasn't even a women's NCAA. They had a women's program run by a different branch. I think it was called AIW. I'm not positive, and it wasn't until the mid to late, actually I guess the early 80s before the NCAA, after Title IX, added women's swimming. So there's been a lot of changes, of course, and the current change is much tougher now that they've cut the scholarships down to, I think men are allowed 9.5 scholarships, and women have 14, and they have to fill a team of 18 plus divers. Where on the other hand, you have something like a sport like gymnastics that competes with 5 athletes with 4-piece apparatus, and they've got 15 full scholarships. So it's really not a level playing field for all the different sports.
Well, one thing that hasn't changed is the heart of the athlete. And you've coached and worked with some great athletes, including Mark Spitz, John Neighbor, Matt Biondi, Janet Evans, Mary T. Maher. What common traits do you see in all of those individuals?
Well, I think mainly it's their dedication. Anybody that has been involved in swimming at all has to if you take a step back and just look at what the swimmer has to make in the way of sacrifice, as far as not only time in training, but as far as time out of training as well. They have to give up a lot of their college life if they're going to be successful in swimming.
And when nowadays, are you seeing athletes wanting to take shortcuts, or do you still see that work ethic there?
I think the work ethic is still there. The thing that's changed the most, perhaps, is, well, without a question, is the advent of the professional swimming athlete. Because when most Olympic teams I was coaching on, the women averaged probably around 17, probably not even 18 years of age, and the men, most of them probably didn't average over 20 to 21. We'd have the occasional Carl Roby and people like that, it'd be 26, 28 that were come back and on the team, but predominantly you should also have maybe 2, 3, 4 high school ones to counterbalance that, with the majority, of course, being from the collegiate base.
Seeing what you see today with the longevity of the athlete's career, did you ever think that they'd be swimming into their 30s and still competing on such a high level?
Did we say 30s or 40s? No, I didn't. Although we had the occasional one. Chet Jastrzemski was on the '68 team. If I'm correct, I think he was around 28, and that was his. I think he missed one Olympic team early in his career, but that was, I believe, his third Olympic team that he was on. But anyways, 28, and of course Gary Hall went on and swam in '68 in his first Olympics and was captain of the team in '76. So we had the odd one, but predominantly it was the younger athletes. But it quite obviously was something we just weren't familiar with the success they're having today. The main thing then was just the lack of a goal. I think now I suppose the monetary goal certainly must help a lot. But I can remember, like with Sharon Stouter, she was just barely 16 when she won her 3 golds and a silver in 1964. and then she had found it extremely tough to keep going the next couple of years, and then finally did make a comeback attempt in '68 to get back to top. As I recall, I think she missed the team by 100th or 200ths of a second. She was fourth place by just a touch out. And she at that time, of course, would have only been 18, 19 years of age.
Sure. What you kind of just said there was that the athletes stayed motivated longer because they had goals. And from a Olympic coach's perspective, how do you go about identifying goals or working with goals in athletes?
Well, I think from the word go, everything needs to be goal oriented. I've always been very goal oriented myself, and always felt that was the way to best motivate swimmers, was through goal orientation. But different ones are completely different as far as some are more farsighted and can look out and think, maybe Olympics. Others are looking out, trying to make a standard. So you have to try to identify and help each one identify their goal. And I think that if I were to say the one thing that as I look back on my career, that's the most important, I think it's getting people to aim high enough. As fate would have it, was assigned to a ship, and then one cruiser and 3 destroyers. It was on a ship that went to the 1956 Olympics and in Australia, and I was able to go in the village there because I'd been swimming with some of the athletes that were on the team, and yours truly, Jack Nelson, was one of the ones that I met there, and went to Melbourne to visit and see the Olympic Games. Was having that opportunity to see it and see the guys that I knew swimming in the Olympics, and see Murray Rose and George Breen and see them win. It was it really was a big impression for me. When I saw that was a terrific motivation for me when I came back and started coaching a couple of years later. And I was at that time wanting to be a football coach and didn't even know I was ever going to be a swimming coach.
It's not. It's very interesting to find out that you served the United States in the capacity as a member of the Armed Services in the Navy, and yet in 1984 you also served the United States as head Olympic coach for the swim team in Los Angeles. What feelings do you have about that, and what kind of can you talk about that privilege?
Well, first of all, in looking back on my naval career, it was something in those days that we, it was a compulsory service, and I was married at the time, and actually had a daughter born when I was overseas on the ship. But that was, that was something that was part of our life in those times. You had to look forward, for the most part, to military service, and I never did think too much about it. Now, as I look back, when I go to a football game, quite often they'll be celebrating, like, say, Veterans Day or something. They'll have everybody in the different branches of service stand up, and it really means a lot to have had that opportunity to have done that, and actually to have served in that capacity. I didn't feel like that at the time, but it does mean something now to have had that as part of my career. As far as the going back after delivering the Los Angeles Times for about 9 years on my bicycle, then to go back and be in that surrounding there and go back home like that and have a chance to be the head Olympic coach, why I couldn't even express words that would justify how it felt to me and for my whole family who was able to attend and observe it.
Don Gambril.
Well, first of all, I want to explain my attire. I'd like to blame it on my wife, and she will be waiting for me to do that when I get home, but I won't. It was my fault. It was hanging in the closet. I got the jacket, I got the shirt, but I left the pants there. And I found that out about 10 or 15 after 5. I'm supposed to be down there at 5:45. So anyway, now you wonder what type of guy you had in charge of your Olympic team? Now you know. We had some things to overcome with the team in 1984. First of all, the boycott in 1980. We had several swimmers that made that team that had made the team in 1980 and were denied the chance to swim. We had others, unfortunately, that didn't make the team again, and so it was a team that was put together of people that were feeling really bad for their comrades that hadn't made it, and others, of course, very excited for making it. The next thing was, this is the first time we were actually going to have a combined team in 1980 when we didn't compete. In 1984 is the first time we'd combined men's and women. And that really put a lot of great coaches on the staff. Except if you're the head coach and you're looking at the other 7 coaches who are also head coaches that have been your contemporaries and rivals for all these years, then there's a little bit of wondering what's going to happen when we all get in the same room. We conceived an idea to go to Hawaii and take 80-some athletes, ones that we felt had the best chance to make the Olympic team. And so we went over for a week at Thanksgiving and took the coaching staff over there and began to try to mesh as a coaching staff. It worked out for the most part, and by the time we got to LA, we also had 2 other coaches that were added for the training camp because of the number of athletes that they had on the team. We trained in Mission Viejo, and it was a very good training camp and a very good place to train. I want to tell you about something that was an event aside from the Olympics that I felt really could have had tremendous repercussion for our team. We went to dinner downtown in Los Angeles with the entire team. This makes an entourage of pretty close to 70 by the time we had, I think, as I recall, 53 athletes, plus the coaches and managers and trainers and everybody that went along with us. Well, we were invited back to Dara Torres' house for a little luncheon after mid-afternoon get-together at her house in Beverly Hills, just down the street from the Beverly Hilton. Very, very nice house. And in the backyard, tennis court, 25-yard swimming pool, basketball court on about a 3 or 4 car garage, and we've got a lot of athletes hanging around, and guys like to show off a little bit sometimes. So first thing I have is a big tennis match with Steve Lindquist and somebody out here in tennis court. I'm worried about a sprained ankle. Nobody got in the pool. Over on the basketball court, I look out here, and here's our entire freestyle relay, Rowdy Gaines, Tom Jager, the whole group playing basketball. And I'm worried about sprained ankles and broken legs, and so I look over, and there's about 2 or 3 of the alternates that are sitting there watching the game. And there were also two of the alternates playing. And I think, well, okay, you don't go up to Tom Jager and say, Tom, I don't want you to play more basketball because you might get hurt. That doesn't work. Not when they're 23 years old, 24-year-old men that really think they and maybe do much more than a coach. And so I called the 2 that were going to swim in the morning on the 2 alternates, and I called them over and I said, I want you guys to sit down. You're not playing any more basketball. They said, what do you mean we can't play more basketball? I said, well, somebody's going to get hurt, and when they do, I have to have you available to swim in the relay. They put the ball up and sit down. So that really was a way of handling a situation which could have been explosive. I also have a relay that we're not going to show because it takes 8 minutes, and I was told we only had 8 minutes. It didn't take quite 8 minutes, so I'm a little faster than that. But it was the 800 free relay. It was very much reminiscent of what you've just seen. We had 4 athletes on that team that were selected to be on the relay, and we knew who the relay was going to be. And when we had the trials, after the trials at night, I went up to Bruce Hayes and told him, I said, Bruce, you're going to anchor the relay in LA, so I want you to, begin thinking about that and getting yourself ready. I'd seen his college coach put him on anchor laps before. He wasn't the fastest guy, but he always swam negative split, swam very, very good control. And he says, why me? And I said, well, because I know that they're going to have Michael Gross anchoring, and hopefully we can get you in position where he'll overswim. So we conceived that idea right from the first and went to training camp and lived with that idea. There was a little discourse at times between others on the staff that thought maybe we shouldn't do that, we should do something else, but we made the decision that that's the way we would do it. So we get ready to swim the race, and we lead off with Heath, who had just the night before been second to Mikhail Gross in the 200 free when Mikhail broke the world record, and we led him off. And as the Germans lined up, we could see that Mikhail was going to anchor. Then next we had Dan Larson. Dan was, I believe, 25, 26 years old, the most experienced swimmer that we had on the team. So I felt quite confident that he'd be able to maintain a lead and hopefully extend that lead. Next we had Jeff Float, and Jeff had placed fourth the night before in the 200 free and had a lot of experience as well, and was one of the team captains. So we wanted him in third place, and then anchoring with Bruce Hayes. The relay, and I'm sure many of you probably do remember it, and it was the closest relay race, and still even closer than the 100 was this time as far as measured time. But we led off, and Michael got us a good lead. And then the two guys that I have a lot of confidence, they were great experience and know just how to swim this race. Dan went out faster than he's probably ever gone out in the 200 in his life. And he has over a body length, has gained over a body length. We're almost 2 body lengths ahead by the time he gets to 50, back to 75, and we're still holding most of that lead. And then all of a sudden, he begins to crumble, and the lead closes up to less than a body length. Well, Jeff Float takes off, same thing again, extends over body length and a half lead into the wall, comes off, and 75 once again overswam. And if you've had swimmers that butterfly, sometimes they can't even get their arms out of the water hardly, and he had really a tough time getting to finish. And then Bruce Hayes left. Mikhail Gross at that point only had a body length to make up, and he was 6'8", and they said his wingspan was 8 foot. And he almost made that up on the start. By the first 50, he was dead on even with him. And you see Bruce in the film going with his 2-beat kick. He'd flutter a little bit in and out of the wall, 2-beat kick, stayed all the way through the 100, back about halfway back towards 150, and he began to put his legs in. They hit the last wall just even, and Bruce the battle then became very strategic as far as trying to get to the wall and who was going to get there. And I know, coaches, that you work with your swimmers on discipline all the time, on finishing and concentrating to finish and touching the wall. And if you look at the film, as I've looked at it many times, as you look at that film, as they come to the last 5 meters, they're so dead even that you can't tell who's going to be there first. And halfway between the rope, the backstroke flags and the wall, Mikhail Gross takes a breath. And I really feel that 0.04 of a second probably was in that particular stroke. So we did win the race, and it was exciting. They had a lot of, I guess, probably 10,000 fans in temporary bleachers that I'm sure that the safety people were concerned that the bleachers might not last through the enthrall that came from the crowd. But it was a very, very exciting thing. And I went to the press conference. Most of the time I hadn't been able to do that. And this was the last event of the day, and I didn't have anybody else to talk to for the next race. So after recovering from the race, and by the way, I'd had a 5-way bypass some 9 months before that time, and I was sitting down recuperating after the race. Went to the press room, and they're talking, everybody's talking, and Jeff Float has a hearing impairment and doesn't hear well, and with his hearing aids out, I'm sure he has almost no hearing ability. And they asked him what he felt, and he said, well, the only thing I can say is the noise of the crowd was deafening. Thank you very much.